Alright, today let's talk about caliber and my opinions on uh, what calibers for what function. If you're just starting out, new to firearms, never fired a firearm before, I would recommend a 22. 22 caliber is a good starter firearm. It's what I started on. Very low recoil. Um, the cost of the ammunition is very, very inexpensive. Um, also, it'd be a decent, how do I put it, zombie apocalypse type firearm. Um, when I speak of zombie apocalypse, I mean a situation where um, ammunition's not going to be as readily available. You're not going to be able to go into a Walmart or a gun store and just buy ammo. It's going to be pure chaos. You're going to have to scavenge for materials. 22 ammunition is going to be very abundant in that case. There's millions of 22 rounds out there. It's a very common caliber and a very good starting caliber. Um, Also, when we're talking about zombie apocalypse, 9 millimeter. Um, that's another one that is just very abundant, and this is a good starter handgun, um, because, like I said, 9 millimeter ammunition is very abundant. Um, it's relatively inexpensive. The recoil is manageable, and as much as I personally am not a fan of Glock, in that particular situation, if you're prepping for a zombie apocalypse or some other type of situation where you're going to have to scavenge, I would recommend a Glock 17 or a Glock 19. It's one of the most popular guns out there. Magazines are interchangeable, all the other parts are interchangeable. So for that situation, I would recommend a Glock 17 or a Glock 19, 9 millimeter. Um, The Beretta 92 FS is another good one. Very common. Lots of them out there. A little bit harder to maintain, but still a very good apocalyptic firearm. Um, On to the 40 caliber. This particular caliber I would recommend for somebody like myself who um, everyday self-defense. Not that I defend myself on a daily basis, but living in the society that we live in right now where ammunition is readily available, I can walk into a store, buy ammunition, and utilize it. It's readily available so long as I can afford it. um, Particularly I like the the mass, the mass of the 40 caliber. It does have a little more recoil than, say, the 9 millimeter. It's still manageable. You need a little more training with a 40 cal over a 9. Usually when you go from 9 to 40, you notice a considerable difference. Um, Once you learn the firearm and the nuances of shooting 40 cal, you adapt to it. And the same can be said with going from 40 to 45, which is going to be our next caliber we're going to discuss. In my opinion, um, 45 is becoming obsolete. It, it it's still a good caliber when we talk about stopping power, which is generally a myth. Um, I consider energy transfer. When the bullet first impacts the object, it's going to transfer a lot of energy. Usually, when you have a larger caliber, it's going to dump all of its energy in a wider spread. Uh, 9mm and 22 tend to have more penetration than energy transfer. So they're going to go faster, but they're not going to dump all their energy when it hits the target. It's going to, dump some energy and keep going. That's not to say that 40 and 45 don't do that either, but my opinion is the 45 just doesn't excel at any aspect. Yeah, it dumps a lot of energy when it hits its target, but it the cost of the 45 ammunition is becoming increasingly higher and higher. It's not as readily available as say 9mm, um, and a lot of people just don't really like to shoot 45. It's a man's load. I mean, it's big gun, it's big caliber, and it makes a big boom, and it's got some recoil. Um, Calibers that I wouldn't recommend for self-defense and or zombie apocalypse, those really obscure ones like say 380, even though they're not really obscure. 10mm, that's an obscure one. Um, and that's one end of the spectrum to the other. 380 is going to have a lot of penetration, not much energy transfer, whereas the 10mm is going to have less penetration and a lot of energy transfer. 357 SIG, if it comes down to having to scavenge for ammunition like that is not going to be readily available. Um, 38 Special is going to be very available, very decent, um, very very decent load, um, very comparable to the 380, and a lot of 357 Magnum revolvers can fire either 357 or 38 Special. Consult your owner's manual before you take this advice, though not all 357 Magnum revolvers can fire 38 Special. Consult your owner's manual. If you don't have an owner's manual, contact the manufacturer and ask them if 38 Special can be fired in that particular firearm. You can not only cause damage to the gun, but you can cause damage to yourself by using the inappropriate caliber in a firearm, any firearm. Um, that brought me to another point, but I just kind of spaced out on it there. We got the 38 Special, we got the 357. There's plenty more calibers out there, but typically you want to stay away from the obscure ones. Also, I just remembered the point I wanted to bring up is plus P and plus P plus. What that is pressure, plus pressure. It's not power or anything. It's pressure, and that's how firearms work. The bullet works off of pressure when it's in the chamber and the firing pin is struck. That causes a little explosion, which ignites the gunpowder, which expels gases, which build up pressure inside of the cartridge itself, and the pressure with the, the projectile being in the barrel, that's what forces the expulsion of the projectile. There's a lot of science behind it, but back to the plus P and plus P plus. Make sure that your firearm is rated for plus P and plus P plus before you use that type of ammo. And once again, that ammo in a scavenging apocalyptic situation isn't going to be as readily available. So all these people that say 9mm is just as good as 40 and 45, yes, it is with the right ammo. With plus P and plus P plus rounds in certain jacketed hollow points, they can be just as devastating as a 40 or a 45 or a 357 SIG or a 10mm. But ammunition is not going to be as readily available when it comes down to having to scavenge in an apocalyptic situation. People are going to be making their own ammunition, and a lot of that is not going to be the ideal ammunition that we would want. You know, some of it may not even have a copper jacket. We may just be shooting raw lead because that's what's available to us. Uh, the gunpowders that we have available may not be, you know, ideal, and you know what we really want to use. You know, those kind of things aren't going to be as readily available in a scavenging type of situation. So those are some things to keep in mind depending on, you know, what you want to do with your firearm. Like I said, if you're first starting out, 22 caliber or a 380 or 9 millimeter. You know, if you're just wanting to get familiar with firearms, if uh, if you're prepping for an apocalyptic situation, Glock 9 millimeter, hands down, most common handgun out there. They're going to be everywhere. 9 millimeter ammunition is going to be readily available. Um, if you're modern everyday carry, I I recommend 40 caliber. 9 millimeters just as good, but I recommend 40 caliber just because that's my personal choice. That's what law enforcement has used for the longest time. That's that's the I don't want to go into the in between 9 millimeter and 45 like everybody says, because it isn't in between 9 millimeter and 45. Um, it it has its own little what's the word I'm looking for? It's in a class of its own. 9 millimeter excels at certain things, 40 excels at other things, and 45 just kind of, you know, it doesn't really excel at anything. Um, you know, and some people are gonna really hate on that because there's diehard 45 fans out there. I used to be one of them, but after, you know, having shot 45 for some time, I really lost interest in it. Anyways, that's today's Jacketed Hollow Points. Hope you got something out of it, and thank you for watching, and please give us a like and subscribe.